Funding for this program was provided by Bryce Canyon Natural History Association, Southern Utah University Faculty Development Fund, SUTV, Southern Utah University's television station, and the Utah Office of Tourism, Utah Life Elevated.
Canyoneering.
It takes place in the canyon.
Exploration of how canyons were formed and what's underneath them and how you climb the sides of them. No clue.
Coming down a canyon in a canoe or something.
Sounds like somebody who is climbing canyon walls and that kind of stuff, but I've never heard of it before.
Is that what it is? Exploring canyons?
Canyoneering. Some are still learning about it, and it's known as canyoning in other parts of the world, but one of the hot spots for canyoneering now is the Colorado Plateau. The Colorado Plateau includes the highlands drained primarily by the Colorado River. It's a land blessed by light and stark contrasts, wide open plains, towering mountains, and deep canyons. Canyoneering is a sport that requires hiking, climbing, rappelling, swimming, sliding, scrambling, and crawling through canyons, big and small. Canyoneering takes you to remote and remarkable places. It requires technical rope and equipment skills. The canyons can have tricky footing. Canyoneering baffles tourists as hikers don wetsuits in the hot desert.
So there is a lake or something.
Canyoneering challenges public land managers as its numbers increase, leading to canyon congestion. Without proper precautions, canyoneering can kill. Canyoneers wrestle with a clear definition.
It's really a team sport. It's the sport of descending a canyon, whether it be with ropes, or technical descents.
As if you're in the canyons, you're canyoneering. You can have technical canyoneering, which would be going through canyons using technical means such as rappels, perhaps some swimming, but that would not be the same as slot canyoneering, which is a different matter. We define a slot as anything less than an arm width apart.
Descending technical canyons usually involve ropes or climbing, but I enjoy hiking down non-technical canyons too. So canyoneering, well, it could be either, I suppose.
Quite the opposite of mountaineering, I guess. Just the opposite, going down canyon always.
Canyoneering takes you into canyons, and the canyons take you into the earth, to rock itself. Canyons lie hidden beneath the surface in hanging valleys and behind towering walls. The Colorado Plateau consists of all the magical canyons, rivers, streams, and gullies that drain into the Colorado River, mostly in Utah and Arizona. The Paiute legend for the creation of sculptured rock tells of lizards, birds, and other animals that lived here but that could mysteriously turn themselves into people and cause mischief. To control their pranks, the god Coyote turned them to stone.
You can see their faces with paint on them, just as they were before they became rocks. The name of the place is Red Painted Faces.
Geologists give us a different explanation. Hundreds of millions of years ago, thousands of feet of sand were laid down by the wind and rivers draining into an inland sea that covered what's now southern Utah and northern Arizona. Dinosaurs walked the shorelines. Time, burial, and groundwater transformed these deposits to solid stone.
Well, one of the reasons southern Utah is ideally suited for
the formation of slot canyons is we have several sandstone units that have the right characteristics and have suitable thicknesses to become slots. The second thing we need is to have fractures within those rocks that extend vertically. And those fractures end up being the pathways that streams and rivers cut down in their normal draining of the highlands of southern Utah. And then finally, we need uplift, which is critical for the formation of a slot. But most importantly, it has gone very quickly for the last couple of million years. And you end up with very steep walls with very narrow canyon bottoms.
Most of the sculpting occurs gradually, over time, and far from human observation. But in 2004, St. George, Utah residents witnessed the power of snowmelt and heavy rains. That same power creates stunning natural art.
And as a geologist, I might see them differently than most people do, but they're as magic to me as they are to anybody. And I can't think of anything that is more satisfying than to walk in the dark and narrow confines of a slot canyon.
In many canyons, the flash flood evidence rests high or jammed in the slots or stacked against massive stones.
2 years ago, that was the most flash flood we ever had. We had like 18 flash flood. Out of the 18, 6 of them was over the canyon.
Some of these narrow canyons don't even show up on topographical maps.
So you'll see the main drainage, but you won't see how diverse the terrain is inside of that slot canyon.
The rocks have existed for eons, but when people entered the canyons, the story of canyoneering began. Canyoneers regularly encounter Native American artifacts and homes. Native Americans esteemed Zion Canyon and other slot canyons as special places.
Are sacred for a lot of our people, and a lot of our people would only go there at certain times and for prayers and for ceremonies.
Just outside Page, Arizona, Dixie Ellis welcomes visitors to Navajo tribal lands and Lower Antelope Canyon, one of the most photographed canyons in the world.
The slot canyons are very sacred to them, so that's why they really didn't expose it to the public, because they kept it secret for a long time. They pause before they come in. You just have to respect that, you know.
The magic of the sculpted canyons entices viewers and photographers from all over the world.
You get all the different colors of purples and orange. The lighting changes every 20 minutes. It's just incredible.
It's magical. It's like, I've heard it described as a cathedral of light. And it really is, because there's so much light reflected off these walls.
As more and more people enter the canyons, increased appreciation and respect will be needed to preserve the traces left by Native Americans.
We just stand to the side and take our pictures either by camera or just in our own memories and leave it at that. And if we all do that, these things will last thousands of more years.
When some think of canyoneering, they might think of the grandest canyon of them all. The first known Europeans to see the Grand Canyon came from Mexico in 1540. Coronado, searching for the legendary 7 cities of gold, sent Captain Cardenas and some men in a failed attempt to get to the bottom.
They got about a third of the way down and came back and said those spires that they thought were the size of a man were taller than the towers of Seville. So they got kind of a perspective on the magnificence of the Grand Canyon.
Over 200 years later, in 1776, Catholic fathers Dominguez and Escalante traversed the canyons in an attempt to find a route from Santa Fe to California.
There was no way on the other side except a deep and narrow canyon. We feared finding ourselves obliged to do the necessary backtracking, which on the precipice would be extremely difficult.
Dominguez and Escalante finally found a crossing. It's now submerged under Lake Powell. Mountain men, explorers, prospectors, and Mormon settlers eventually worked their way through parts of the plateau. In 1869, a one-armed Civil War veteran, Major John Wesley Powell, set out with a crew and 4 boats to explore the entire length of the unmapped Colorado River.
Well, it was very risky because people didn't do river trips, and they certainly didn't do whitewater trips. Now people do it for fun, but at that time it really was the great unknown.
The river smashed 2 boats and 3 men died while hiking out. Their risky explorations mostly followed the main canyon.
But there were points where they had to climb out of these canyons, and sometimes they got into some fairly dangerous technical climbing.
If I lose my hold, I shall fall to the bottom and then perhaps roll over the bench and tumble still further down the cliff. At this instant, it occurs to Bradley to take off his drawers, which he does, and swings them down to me. I hug close to the rock, let go with my hand, seize the dangling legs, and with his assistance am enabled to gain the top. Major John Wesley Powell.
Powell and his men went on to do the first known descents of major canyons in Zion. In 1879, a group of Mormons left the Escalante area to settle remote San Juan County of southeastern Utah. They called it the worst country they ever saw.
They reached a point where wagons could not go through, and they sent back to get dynamite. They dynamited. They actually tacked a road almost literally on the side of one of those slot canyons, and then using ropes to hold the wagons back and various other devices, they lowered their wagons to the bottom of the hole in the rock.
Over 125 years later, on a hot summer day, 60 Mormon girls and their leaders from Arizona retraced the pioneers' steps.
And for us, it was a great legacy of faith and hard work. And to see if we could just make it up to the top and see what they faced is a great challenge.
More people came to this country. The canyons provided routes for moving livestock to and from the high country. More settlements appeared, creating opportunities for the honest and hardworking, and for the outlaws. The notorious Butch Cassidy used the rugged land to hide, and the canyons north of Hanksville became known as the Robber's Roost. The word canyoneer reportedly first appears in a letter from one of John Wesley Powell's crew members. Later, the term canyoneer was used exclusively for only those who had run the entire Grand Canyon, and then it was adopted by the Stavely family in 1970 for their new motorized rafting company, Canyoneers, Inc. At about the same time, the term canyoneering began to appear in the limited guidebooks referring to off-trail routes, previously only reached by rock climbers.
And a lot of times we get into these canyons where you would look at drop-offs in the canyon and need to use ropes to get completely through the canyon.
And just like some climbing locations, a few canyons now suffer overcrowding. Canyon congestion causes waiting and backup at pool crossings and rappel stations, and in some places, like Zion National Park, the idea of solitude was endangered.
When I got here in 1994, there certainly were people that were doing slot canyons, but it was not all that many. And seemed like the subway started to become very popular in the mid-90s, about 10 years ago. And we found that there were frequently Saturdays where we had hundreds of people going through the subway in a day.
The increased backcountry canyon use, along with the high-profile deaths of 2 scout leaders in 1993, set the stage for a permit system in Zion to limit people and their impact on the canyons and improve safety. Well before sunrise, permit seekers line up outside the Zion National Park backcountry desk. Zion requires permits for all narrow and technical canyons, even if it's just a day trip.
Seeing nobody else for the entire day, which is one of the things that I like the most about Zion. And I'm willing to get up at 5 a.m. a few days a year to help make that happen.
Not everyone likes the permit system. Some think standing in line during the precious cool early morning hiking hours is wrong, and others wonder about the challenge of getting to the backcountry office or a computer terminal when you're already out in the canyons.
There's some that would prefer that there was no permit system, there was no limit on use. There's some that are very glad that there's limits on use, that we're protecting resources. But I think overall visitors would like for our permit system to be easier to use.
To get a permit and a campsite for tomorrow night in the Narrows.
There's always a few people that are disappointed if they can't get a permit. But for the most part, people in general are pretty happy. And if they can get a permit for the subway, they're very happy.
Some canyoneers believe a few canyons might need regulation, but not all canyons.
It has grown in popularity. I'm not sure if it's grown in popularity as much as the Park Service has said it's grown in popularity, because if you start it at several hundred canyoneers and grow to several thousand, yeah, it's a large percentage gain, but the number it's still not as popular as climbing or anything like that.
Some other national parks and BLM sites also require permits, but most do not. They often restrict group size to 12. Most public land managers are preparing for increased canyon use.
It is in the monument management plan to keep tabs on places of heavy use, and we do have some structure in the planning for implementing some use restrictions or allocations in those heavy areas, but we're not looking at that yet.
One of the increasingly popular non-technical canyoneering areas on BLM land is just off the Hole in the Rock Road in the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, where people explore the slot canyons, Spooky and Peekaboo. Carol and Boyd Fife from Cedar City love to bring family and friends. The canyons have their own animal and plant life.
We got spiders.
Many types of snakes, both safe and dangerous, inhabit the canyons along with lizards and more lizards along with other creatures. Floods clean out the slot canyons often, and most creatures have fallen in, strayed, or sought shelter from the heat. In the wider and open canyons, you might find large mammals. In the wet canyons, even the logs kids play on may have surprises. The streams also have fish, frogs, and aquatic insects. The wetter environment allows ferns and flowers to thrive. In the drier canyons, cactus and desert flowers flourish. But back in the slots like Spooky and Peekaboo that are scoured by floods, little plant and animal life is found. The Fifes just find lots of fun.
Oh, you can go. It's a line forward. Come forward. I don't like it.
The hiking, the exploring has always been a real tradition with our family, and it's something that we've always enjoyed and I think always will enjoy.
In some places, recycled Jurassic sand makes a fun playground.
Oh.
The Fifes say they'll continue making memories in the canyons. Great adventures and good times bring them together. Another typical, non-technical canyoneering group is college students on a backpacking trip during spring break. They head to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and to some side slots.
It is beautiful. You've got the green water of the Colorado River and the red rock, the high canyons and the blue sky. Just all the contrast of the colors is beautiful. I love it. I like the hiking, and there's some rock climbing and some wading through water, and yeah, you gotta use a lot of teamwork to get up over some of the choke stones and whatnot, and it's good times.
Some people move on from canyon hiking to more technical challenges. That means ropes and hardware. They can begin to learn about technical canyoneering by signing up with a guide service. Matt Moore and Philip Rhodes lead people from all over the world on canyon adventures.
For most of the people that are on our trips, it's their first experience rappelling, of course, and their first experience out in the West. So there's an awful lot of overwhelming stimuli for them.
Today the group explores Blarney Canyon, 25 miles from Hanksville, Utah, one of many possible beginner technical canyons.
This is the safe way to go. In canyons, you don't know what's out there. Don't know if there's going to be a flash flood or or things, so I thought this would be the safest way to go for the first time or so.
You'll notice there's 2 loops, leg loops.
Blarney Canyon is a 4-mile round trip with 2 rappels and a lot of down climbing slots. Only a few in the group have rappelled before. Most are first timers.
Before I started, my leg was already shaking. And so as I start getting down, I feel like I lost control. So I need to hold on to something. That's why I didn't follow the instruction. I didn't listen to the guy carefully because I panic. So when you panic, you just, you don't know what you're doing.
There you go.
Ooh.
No worries, we got you. Nope, you need to keep that right hand on that rope at all times.
Even after I got down here, I was still shaking. It was an experience, and I'll definitely want to try it again and do it again for sure. Just because this is my first time, and I'm not going to give up with that. So.
But why do people appearing to struggle love it?
A universal motive is what we call mastery motivation, and that is just facing a challenge successfully is innately rewarding for anyone. Now with these adventure sports, we have the added dimension of fear. I think fear serves to magnify this mastery motivation.
It's a really cool experience to be out here and see how people progress mentally, because you'll see that most of this type of sport is actually just mental hurdles. Once you trust the equipment, you actually see people grow quite a bit.
Obviously, some people really enjoy the rappels more than the slots. Some people don't particularly care for the rappels, but they love the narrow slots and the climbing challenges that are within those slots. The kids love it, of course. The kids are just natural climbers and scramblers. To them, it's just one big long playground out there for them in those slot canyons.
The next day, Rhodes takes another group to a different area near Moab. There are fewer slots today, but much more impressive rappels. 7-year-old Rachel is also on the trip with her 63-year-old grandmother from New York City.
Wanted to try something new and different.
With this group, even a small crevice presents a challenge. But Rhodes helps and encourages. The group gets some final instruction before rappelling into the medieval chamber.
Very nervous. Very, very nervous. My knees are wobbling. But I will try it. I'm feeling better now that I'm all suited up.
Today the group uses a rack with a breaker bar for a smooth
The
rappel.
away from you, the slower you're gonna go.
The first few rappel 90 feet into the slot.
Guys, it looks great down there.
Yeah.
Then little Rachel goes over the edge, her body weight barely able to pull the rope. Then Grandma follows. Even after a warning, she pendulums into a bush. But she keeps going.
It was great once I got going. When I stopped and looked down, it was a little nerve-wracking, but actually, once I got going, the equipment really does hold you, and so you have a lot more confidence then.
The rest of the group waits in the cool chamber.
I'm just having a blast.
After the first rappel and a short hike down the hanging canyon, the group comes to Morning Glory Arch, situated against a massive wall. They prepare for what's called a simul rappel.
And what we're gonna be doing is sitting on our side and using each other's body weight as an anchor. And 2 people will be rappelling at a time.
Ellen and her granddaughter prepare to go down the wall, not the arch. But Ellen freezes. She says she can't do it this time. The camera backs away to ease the pressure. After 15 minutes of reassurance and discussion, because the only other way out is back up the cliff on a rope or an expensive helicopter rescue, she slowly begins the rappel.
You know, the first time you get up all your courage and you do it, and then you have to get your courage up again. It was really hard to do that a second time, and also to go over the edge. And once I did go over the edge, once I got started, I was fine. That's the hardest part, was just getting started. And it's an incredible experience.
In nearby Arches National Park, this kind of climbing and rappelling on large arches is strictly prohibited. But here on Utah state land, it's okay.
Really push out with that left hand.
This even tops some of the pressure doctors feel.
I don't know, no, surgery's more controlled. This one, you know, is like the life that I lose may be my own. Yeah, definitely won't be able to operate now that I'm like shaking, you know? Look at that.
After all are down safely and show off their dirty hands, they deserve a little swinging relaxation.
1, 2, 3.
There's just an incredible sense of accomplishment and achievement when these people get down to the bottom of the rappels. As a guide, you feel delighted, or you feel kind of honored to be a part of that experience.
For those who want to go beyond the basics and learn about technical canyoneering, some guide companies, a few universities, and some other organizations offer classes. In Cedar City, Utah, instructors with the nonprofit American Canyoneering Association, or ACA, lead newcomers and experienced climbers through canyoneering ethics, safety, and knot-tying basics. Then the group hits the canyons for basic climbing, stemming, and rappelling to get more comfortable with the rock.
What I really like to do with these classes is be able to help people learn the techniques so they can more safely enjoy getting out in canyon country. You can just hold yourself in position there like a wedge.
I think going out and just doing this would be very foolish, actually. The more I know before I decide to do something like this, the better.
Negotiating canyons can range from easy sandy walks to full free rappels, some hundreds of feet high. Water temperatures range from pleasant to dangerously cold and fatal. The ACA developed a canyon rating system to help categorize and describe these canyon challenges. It consists of 3 or 4 numbers and letters. The first number in the rating system describes the terrain. Class 1, canyon hiking. Class 2, scrambling and short climbs. Class 3 involves rappelling. And Class 4 with complex rope work and difficult climbing. The number is followed by a letter which describes the water conditions. Class A for dry or insignificant water. Class B, water, pools, insignificant current. And Class C, strong current where wetsuits or dry suits may be required. The letter R can be added for extraordinary risk factors, or X may be added for extreme situations that should only be attempted by expert canyoneers. And then finally a Roman numeral from 1 to 6 describes how long the hike should take, from only a couple of hours to multi-day trips. So, a typical intermediate canyon like Pine Creek in Zion National Park is rated 3B2 for technical rope work with swimming or wading that takes half a day. The rating system provides enough information for canyoneers to plan safe trips. Of course, weather and other factors always impact the actual conditions. Detailed canyon information, or beta as it's called, is available in guidebooks and websites sponsored by the ACA and others. ACA members want to pass along improved respect and knowledge, but have some concerns about a few newcomers.
They want to come and they want to have a good time. They spend a day and they go. They're not really involved in the wilderness. They're not involved in preservation.
Another big issue is the anchors. We're using simpler systems, sometimes retrievable, but more often than not we're leaving it behind. So we've got to get a lot more creative with our anchor systems.
Creativity in anchor systems leads to controversies. Guidebook author Michael Kelsey has descended more canyons than most people. He's done many solo, but in one of his books he recommended carrying a geology pick or a G-pick for solo or emergency rappels.
You got a good ledge here, but if you want to make it a little safer, you can just tap like that, just very lightly. Just sink that in far enough for safety purposes so the hook cannot migrate. Then you put weight on it, hold it down with your left hand until you put weight on the hook here, and then you just go ahead and rappel. And then at the bottom, of course, you give it a little slack and flip it off, and there's nothing left.
But even suggesting that people mar these precious rocks with a tool infuriates some.
I think if you're carrying a G-pick, you better damn well be a geologist. And this is the reason why. This is a relatively new step, chopped into a slope that's a walk-up, and there's no reason for it.
The G-pick isn't the only controversy involving Kelsey. Some claim the times needed to complete hikes as listed in his books are grossly inaccurate and have led to people getting into trouble. He says years ago he adjusted the hiking times in his books.
I don't get letters anymore, but I got letters on that, and so I changed. I started changing it. If it took me 4 hours, then I'd say it might take 4 or 5 up to 7 hours, depending on how slow you want to go. So, but that same rumor, that same question keeps going over and over and over again.
On the rim of Fry Canyon in southeastern Utah, 3 expert canyoneers gather. The collective mileage these men have hiked, scrambled, and rappelled is staggering. They talk about new techniques for removable anchors. They marvel at the different names attached to the same canyons and reminisce about the canyon country. If you ask them about any canyon, a smile and story emerges. Some wonder how these men have the time to do all this canyoneering.
I actually don't do it that often. Basically, mountaineering and canyoneering, I do it about 110 days a year. And I can pick when I want because I have a very, very understanding employer myself.
This is my home. I live out of my van for anywhere from 6 months to 9 months a year, and almost all of it's in southern Utah. And I built it just so it would fit me. And at any one time, I will have about 90 days worth of food and equipment in the van, so I don't have to stop off and buy food. It's all right here.
Steve Allen, David Black, and Steve Ramorous all contribute unique perspectives on the sport, ranging from land preservation and technical skills to caring for the canyons. They explore Fry Canyon in southeastern Utah, a relatively simple canyon known as a roadkill. It's right below the main highway. They do it for old time's sake.
It was really one of the first canyons that was noted by slot canyoneers, and it actually showed up as a slot canyon back in the 1940s in an article in Desert Magazine. So this is the granddaddy and the start of the true days of people going down through technical slots.
Allen's well known for his books and for coining some of the language used in canyoneering.
It was an outgrowth of looking down a canyon that was shaped like that. It had many curves, and somebody looked up the canyon and said, "Oh, that looks just like Mae West," and the name stuck.
But some have criticized Allen for letting too many people know about the canyons.
And I know that to some that's a controversial idea, that canyoneering books, hiking guides bring in too many people, but I would take the opposite view, that in fact what we need is more people to come into this country and appreciate it.
On a different scale of canyon preservation, Black seeks to keep the canyons clean and thinks there are too many metal bolts permanently placed in the canyons.
I just like doing my canyons in what I consider a traditional way. We're dumbing down the canyons when we bowl them. We're dumbing them down. It doesn't take any brains to clip into a set of bolts and wrap off into the canyon.
Regardless of how people actually treat the canyons, they all know canyoneering will grow one way or another. On an early summer day, experienced canyoneers rendezvous from all around the country in a remote place called Robber's Roost. Most know each other only by email. The entire trip arranged by internet with limited guidance by Tom Jones, a well-known canyoneer.
It's a selfish thing because we want the canyons not to get all crapped out with people leaving stuff there. So the way you do that is you meet these people and you try and get them to follow your ethic of leave as little as possible in the canyon, leave it as clean as possible, and not junk it up.
The participants set up the vehicle shuttle for the day and prepare to hike in.
You got a north coordinate for me? Last four numbers 0204.
The group looks forward to getting out of the sun and into the canyon.
And one of the great things about it is in the summer, when you're in the canyons, that's where it's cool and pleasant out rather than out up in the sun.
Along on the trip are Jim and Nadine Millette from Boston. They've made several of these trips and look forward to them every year.
I find it very spiritual to be hanging on a rope with nothing between me and injury or death, except an 8 or 9 millimeter piece of rope in the middle of God's country.
This is the vacation place to be. We save all our hard-working money to come here every year.
Nadine appears dressed for a hockey game.
Yeah, the first time I went, I didn't have that stuff on when I learned, and I came home with a lot of souvenirs all over my body, and I'd rather not go home with them, just pictures. Get a little scratched up out there.
Across the plateau, Canyoneers' skin does lose when it meets up with the rock. It seems like canyoneers continuously repair and patch clothing, and not just shirts, shorts, and pants, but more expensive wetsuits, and even their backpacks. Some outdoor equipment manufacturers produce custom pieces just for canyoneering, like smaller and narrower packs.
I got the pack.
And hardware more appropriate for canyoneering than climbing. Canyoneers would like to treat their ropes better and also get ropes that absorb less water. But they know rock trashes ropes, and for safety purposes they may have to discard their ropes more often than climbers. Back in the canyon, the group descends deeper into the slots. Everyone takes the route that best fits their skill and body size. Good style prevents beating your body up, but canyoneers don't seem to be real picky about style. Here, a body anchor works with a sliding rappel.
Sit down and do the slide.
The lightest person, Nadine, comes down last, without a rope, into waiting arms. At the last and longest rappel, Jones decides to inspect an anchor he placed 6 months earlier. Rather than drilling the rock and placing a permanent bolt, he chose to put in what's called a dead man. Its name comes hopefully not from the result, but from anchor webbing tied to buried rocks in the sand.
Because you want to make sure that it's actually really solid there.
Yes, you don't end up a dead man.
Traditional way to test it is just to apply a lot of force to it. But there's a question about whether it's very well wrapped around the rock that's under there, and whether the webbing is still intact. Because there are flash floods that go through here and tear it up. It's still good. It hasn't seen that much. No. It's hardly damaged at all. It looks pretty fresh.
Now this stuff, I don't know if we want pictures of this. This is pretty much certified insanity here.
Not everyone in the group thinks avoiding a permanent metal bolt is the best idea.
You got a 100-foot drop. If somebody thinks that to put a bolt in for security would ruin the whole canyon for them. Better to dig a hole and wrap nylon around a rock and drop it in the hole and then wrap off of that with a 100-footer. I weigh 210, and that doesn't appeal to me too much.
But with the dead man inspected and back in place, Thompson trusted enough to be the first down the 100-foot free rappel.
All right, you guys are ready? Yep. Am I ready is the question. Good to go. Okay. And then that white thing is a rope protector.
All right, try and pull it down after me.
When you get just over the edge, you pull it down so it protects that edge.
All right.
Thank you. Have a good time. Yep.
The rest of the group follows into a lush grotto.
That was awesome. The beauty of that whole hanging garden. It's just, I feel so comfortable and safe when I'm on the rope, and I am afraid of heights. But when I'm up there, once I get that rope tight, I know that it has me. I feel safe, and it's no adrenaline. It's just great.
Yeah. As the day ends, some refresh themselves.
Oh, yes. This is what it's all about here.
When the weather turns, some canyoneers head for warmer comforts. Others continue pushing.
And to be honest, it never really interested me. I didn't really think I'd ever get into ice climbing because it has kind of the perception of being dangerous or what have you. I mean, that's just, we're just talking about frozen water, right? rather than going and dropping down in the spring, summer, and fall and just rappelling down through there, you're now going from the bottom and heading up. So you get both the experience of ice climbing, which in itself is just awesome, but then the whole aspect of being inside a slot canyon and climbing, it's phenomenal. It's amazing.
It was dangerous, probably.
I think if I was tied up pretty well and had a really good person holding the rope, I might be willing to try it.
It's a dangerous sport, but so is everything else. Heights and claustrophobia. People run into those two things and combine that with some difficult swimming.
When I took this up and my wife started first hearing stories and seeing some of the pictures, one of her first inquiries was where my life insurance policy was.
There's a feeling of commitment that you don't have climbing a mountain. You climb up as much as you can, and if you make it, great. If you don't, you retreat. In a canyon, there's no retreat.
As with most adventure sports, many people participate in canyoneering with no problems, just extreme pleasure and adventure. But when something goes wrong out here, it can go very wrong. Canyoneering accidents involve the full range, including dehydration and heat, to falls and hypothermia and drownings.
Some people have been killed. There have been some fairly terrific high-profile accidents. It's caught public's attention.
The only thing I've read is just that, canyoneering, the guy who had his boulder drop on his arm and he had to cut it off. That's about the only thing I knew much about it.
I think certainly the notoriety that came from my story has affected the sport of canyoneering because that I know specifically in the region around Canyonlands, the Park Service and the BLM people get a lot of inquiries about where Blue John Canyon is, about how they can go to see the place where I was trapped.
In 2005, 2 college students, experienced canyoneers, drowned in a pool in Glen Canyon National Recreation Area. In 1993, 2 scout leaders drowned in high water in Kolob Creek near the northern border of Zion National Park. Even in the desert, water seems to be a formidable enemy. The serene and tranquil canyons, with limited escape options, can become deadly, roiling traps in flash floods. In 1997, in Antelope Canyon outside of Page, Arizona, 11 people drowned when 50 feet of water from a thunderstorm miles away swept through the canyon. The canyon was closed and then reopened 9 months later with improved safety features. The Navajo tribe installed sirens and boxes containing safety nets to be thrown to possible victims. On a cool spring day, the Zion National Park high-angle search and rescue team conducts training. They prepare for those times when, by accident or by poor choice, people need help.
Could you set up a couple of edge lines?
So this may be a pickoff scenario. And then cantilever over. The V-strap, the way it was rigged up.
What this all really means is that these people train hard. Today they send a pretend victim to the bottom of an 80-foot canyon near a rushing stream.
Julie, she's our patient. Julie, find yourself a good anchor to get over the edge.
Can you stand there okay? Yeah. Cool.
Once inside a canyon, the temperature can drop as much as 20 degrees. She awaits rescue. The rest of the team prepares to send a litter down with an attendant to get her.
Need a little bit of slack on main. Attendant is at the edge. Down slow, slow.
Attendant would like to come up less than 2 feet.
Tell them 2 feet from stop. Slow up on main.
After that successful practice, they discuss ways to improve and move on to a different exercise.
It's obvious now at this point that without a dedicated search and rescue team that is highly trained and ready to go at a moment's notice, many more lives would be lost in the backcountry than what are currently. Your typical rescued person is a 20 to 29-year-old male. Regardless of what activity they're taking part in, the common thread is a lack of what I would consider to be basic skill in rope management. If they do get their rope stuck, inability to climb that rope, inability to control their position on the rope when they're on rappel. We've had several rescues where in the middle of the rappel, the person just flips upside down, can't stop themselves, and they ride the rope headfirst into the ground.
Federal, state, and local teams all put their lives at risk to rescue people. Unlike some areas in the country, Zion doesn't currently require victims to pay for these rescues.
We've gotten brownies and cookies. We've gotten donation checks, but more than anything, you know, the thanks is what we really appreciate the most. Just hearing thank you from somebody.
Some people are surprised at how much water exists in these canyons and are shocked at just how cold the desert water can be. Once water fills the canyons, sunshine may never hit some of these potholes. It's often difficult to determine the depth and size and if a person can even get out of the pool. Even with a wetsuit, the body shuts down. Hypothermia and drowning can follow. Ropes should never be pulled until an exit is achieved. A common accident in the backcountry involves sprained and broken ankles and legs. It's recommended that you never jump.
What about waist deep?
Some places, like the subway, can have stunningly clear and clean water. But all of these canyons act as the desert's sewage pipes. In some places you may not want to lick your lips, but regardless of the water conditions, for canyoneers, it's still the trail. Keeping the water and canyons clean will be difficult with so many people moving through them. The minimum impact or leave no trace movement has made progress in educating people in general about preserving natural wild places.
Trash is probably one of our biggest impacts that we see in the canyons. Erosion from people finding an easier route through rather than taking the regular route. Pretty much anything you leave behind is trash. That includes ropes. If you get a rope stuck and you can't retrieve it, you need to go back as soon as possible to get the rope out of the canyon. If you're using webbing or ropes, try to use natural colors.
In long, narrow canyons, solid human waste can be a problem.
If you can't get 200 feet away from the water source to dig a cat hole, you have to take a portable toilet. You have to carry your waste out with you. We provide those to people who want them when they pick up a permit.
A bigger issue is going to be the entry points and the exits, you know, going in and out of canyons. You know, the way that people establish trails or stay on already established trails is going to make a bigger difference.
Footsteps or disturbance of the sensitive cryptobiotic soil should be avoided, not only for the ecological benefits the soil provides, but also to avoid the visual impact.
My regret is that I haven't been more active in the canyoneering community, trying to push that idea that the most important thing out here is preserving the land, not getting down through canyons. So if we look at the total scope of it, it's save the land first, safety second, canyoneering third.
As the sport continues to grow, those involved with canyoneering have some advice for the next generation.
The two words that come to my mind are respect and responsibility. If we have respect for the canyons that we're going into and learn the skills we need to learn to minimize our impacts, and if we accept responsibility for our own actions.
Just plain old research through books that are available or taking a class. Also just going through, finding somebody to go with who is an experienced individual.
And obviously we want to work with the land manager and try and keep them informed and, you know, help them do their job. But the community has to police itself.
And the general concept of escapability to reversibility is common sense. It just means that when you go down through a canyon, you always have a way out.
And letting people know where you're going and when you'll be back, which is one of the key mistakes that I made.
I think most of the major canyon systems have been done. People are going to start looking at the smaller and smaller canyons, and they're going to start doing more difficult things in those small canyons.
The ability to solve a few more problems on their own so a minor problem doesn't turn into a major rescue.
Canyoneering's future may include a change for some canyons. A few canyons may be altered to allow almost anyone in, like Antelope Canyon.
I've seen that canyon in 3 different modes. In the 1980s, I saw it as a technical canyon that we had to go into and rappel. In the early to mid 90s, I saw it as a canyon where there was someone there renting us step ladders. Then after the flash flood back in 1997, there's now a custom-made iron staircase so anybody can walk in and out. That's kind of a sacrificial canyon. Maybe there should be a couple of them here and there, but for most canyoneers, that's not the kind of experience they're looking for. One of our frustrations is anytime somebody talks about canyoneering, you hear things like Zion National Park is the mecca of American canyoneering. And maybe it is, but all that promotion is putting a lot of pressure on places like Zion National Park. And if the sport continues to grow in popularity, it would be nice if we could disperse our use into other areas.
But we're also seeing a lot of development in canyon terrain around the country and other places. California, the Pacific Northwest, Colorado. And I think as more people get into the sport and start expanding out into doing more canyons, we don't have as much to worry about as far as canyons getting overcrowded, because there's still plenty of terrain in other places yet to be explored.
Initially, those expanded canyoneering areas might include other national parks and federal lands in Utah, Arizona, and Colorado. The sport will continue to grow throughout the world, and the individual reasons for canyoneering will also grow.
Looking for some adventure, I guess.
It's a form of recreation. Get out and do something different, a little adventure, add some spice to life.
The line from excitement quickly crosses over to fear and back again, and we like being close to that line.
It's just, the call of the wild, however cornball that sounds. It's just the adventure, it's an escape, it's a challenge.
I think the ability to go where 99.9% of people will never see, never be able to go.
Canyoneering has a strong future as more become involved and as it works through its safety and regulation issues. But that responsibility lies with individuals. Canyoneers can experience the awe of geologic forces. Future canyoneers might have more respect for the land taught by Native Americans. They can have curiosity and determination similar to the early explorers, or the fortitude of the pioneers who lived among the canyons, or maybe the desire to hide out for a while in remote country. But canyoneers need the patience to learn what it takes to canyoneer safely and to leave as little impact as possible. As the canyon wren's melodic notes descend, we can descend the canyons with renewed understanding and respect when we're canyoneering the Colorado Plateau.
The sun rises, it's a new day, another day to play life. You tantalize my every move, to you I cannot lie. Whenever I'm with you, you've got my heart in your hand. If ever I leave you, and I'll leave my love with this land, my love with this land, and watch the color of your sky and your ever-changing eyes. Oh, you're so beautiful. And I'll say, hey, I wanna be hanging by your side, side, side. Hey, I wanna hold your hand so tight. Hey, and I wanna be with you now just all day long. Hey, yeah, and I wanna hear your canyons play your lovely, 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 lovely song. After the hour, well, I'll kiss the hand of this sacred land. Canyon mystery. Always I'll hear your beating heart and speaks of After thee and I, well, I'll kiss the hand of this sacred land. Your canyon, your mystery. Always I hear your beating heart and speaks. Peace and serenity. After thee and I, well, I'll kiss the hand of this sacred land. Brings peace to my soul. Always I hear your beating heart and speaks. And I'm never letting go. Well, and I'm never letting go.
Funding for this program was provided by Bryce Canyon Natural History Association, Southern Utah University Faculty Development Fund, SUTV, Southern Utah University's television station, and the Utah Office of Tourism, Utah Life Elevated. For information about visiting canyoneering locations, go to the Utah Office of Tourism on the web, travel.utah.gov. For more information about canyoneering, see the American Canyoneering Association's website, canyoneering.net, or visit SU Outdoors, the Outdoor Recreation Center at Southern Utah University. Additional information is available from the various national parks, monuments, and Bureau of Land Management offices across the Colorado Plateau. For a DVD copy of this program, contact the Southern Utah University Bookstore.